So the Nvidia RTX 4080 16GB is going to be coming out November 16th. Before you decide to buy, I think there are a couple of things you should really know. It's not only going to be to do with the GPU itself, but the competition that has certainly propped up since it was announced, mainly from AMD. 7900 XT. Look at this, the XTX $999. Now, we are going to say some stuff about this. It is the reference model. You can expect the third-party AIB versions to be more, but still under the price of the RTX 4080. That's going to be the first thing. The price, $1199, is going to be the MSRP. Is Nvidia going to stick to this price, or is it going to be one of those MSRPs that keep floating around? Well, if the 4090 is any indication, they actually stuck pretty close to that $1599 price for most GPUs. Of course, Founders Edition, the one that a lot of people do like, that stayed at MSRP, and a lot of the third-party AIBs like Asus and MSI had models that also were $1599 in the case of the 4090. And then of course, you're going to have a few different models like the Strix or something like that that was considerably more, $1999 to be exact, and you can expect the same thing to happen with the RTX 4080. So $1199 is already expensive for a 4080. Let's just come out right and say it. The 3080 was $699. That seems like a much better price for an 80 class GPU, don't you think? I mean, Nvidia did cancel the 12 gigabyte 4080, which was going to be $899. That was a good move to cancel it, but it was never good to bring it forth in the first place. And that one most likely, as we reported yesterday, is going to end up being a 4070 Ti. Price still to be determined. Now, 4080 at $1199. That's kind of a tough one to swallow when the AMD 7900 XT and XTX do really target the 4080. That's what AMD themselves said, meaning that the performance, while it's not going to be the 4090, you can bet it's going to come very close or likely in traditional rasterization, beat the 4080 in many, many games, especially when you're talking about like regular resolutions like 1440p before you get to 4K and things of that nature. AMD is also saying that they did have a significant amount more in terms of ray tracing performance. That's yet to be seen, but of course, Nvidia is going to lead the way with ray tracing. I don't think anybody's really doubting that. Even at the 4080 versus 7900 XTX level, Nvidia's ray tracing is still superior, and increasingly that is becoming a feature that many gamers do like using. Many new games definitely support it. So if you're going to buy the highest end GPU, it makes sense to turn on all of the eye candy, and ray tracing is part of that eye candy. Typically, sometimes you can notice a big difference, sometimes you can't. It's a very murky subject, but when you do notice a nice difference, you can see, better light reflections, water, shadows. It certainly does make your gaming experience a little bit more three-dimensional, should we say, or even four-dimensional, brings you a little bit more into the real world. Now, if that's going to be a big deal for AMD buyers versus AMD, that's going to remain to be seen, but I would be willing to bet most gamers would opt to maybe pay a little bit less and get equal or better rasterization performance like AMD offers, rather than be tied down to necessarily just having to get the Nvidia GPU for ray tracing. So that's something to keep in mind. But with the price, $1199, it's a little bit spicy, but performance, from what we've gathered before when the Nvidia graphs, should be pretty promising for the 4080. Price aside, I don't think the performance is going to be an issue. If the 4090 is any indication, which really had some tremendous performance, I think it surprised a lot of people right away. The 4080, of course, is going to be a little bit behind it, but still very impressive performance. If it's worth $1199 or not, really, that's going to be up to the consumer to dictate. And of course, I do believe it's probably going to sell out. So that's going to be another thing. If you want to get a 4080, if you're going to be thinking about the price or not, let's put that aside. If you definitely know that you want to get one, go on launch day to a local Micro Center or check out, Newegg, Best Buy. Try to get it on launch day. If my experience is any indication, anytime a GPU comes out, the easiest time to get it, if you know you're going to get it, is going to be on launch day. Of course, usually people don't like pre-ordering or buying something before the reviews come out, but in this case, if you don't don't, you're not going to be able to get it for a decent amount of time, as the 4090 will show us. Launch day certainly had a pretty decent stock for the 4090. Some stores, like a local micro center, got over 150 GPUs, and they even had them in stock up till maybe a day or two after, depending on the store. Best Buy and Newegg had sporadic inventory, but at least it lasted a good 5 to 10 minutes at least, which is better than the RTX 3000. So if you want a 4080, regardless of what you think, if you know you want it, I would say buy it on launch day. That's going to be your best bet, because as we saw with the 4090, it's been sort of perpetually sold out after and very difficult to get. Some people ended up having to go pay a scalper because they didn't get it on launch day. So that's going to be a little bit of a word of advice to you guys. If you should get it or not, that's a completely different subject. But if you know you have a chance that you want it, you can always get rid of it later and, get something else. But launch day is certainly going to be where you want to be if you know you're going to get this GPU. And of course, the 4080 being a very powerful GPU, albeit not as much as the 4090, doesn't have the same TDP as the 4090. It's still a pretty powerful GPU. Some models may have some similar size coolers. I don't think most of them are going to be the size of the 4090, but as we see more of them release, it's certainly going to be a little bit less, a little bit smaller, we hope, but you can always expect some coolers being shared between the 4090 and 4080. Only reason I'm mentioning that is not because of the cooling performance, but a lot of people had a lot of trouble fitting RTX 4090s in their actual gaming PCs. They're very, very wide. Some of them are very long. They didn't fit in many even large cases, not to mention that the cable protrudes out the side with that special 12-volt high power connector. Now, the 4090, we don't even know why those issues were happening with the melting cables, but be aware that is an issue that did happen to various people. Nvidia is still investigating. It might be, a defect with the adapter, maybe the way certain adapters were constructed. The jury is still out on exactly what caused those issues, but I'm not too sure what the 4080 will bring us. Hopefully Nvidia learned something, and if the 4080 had anything to do with the 4090 in terms of its cable and any sort of similar, construction and materials, hopefully they can change it before the 4080 releases, or else they're going to have a continuing headache like they've had with the 4090. I know that even though only a few people had that issue, a lot of people have been apprehensive about buying a 4090. Some people have even bought it and not used it until they get a cable mod cable that they may think is safer, it's better. That's what I did. I got a cable mod, the 12-volt high power cable for my 4090, and it looks so much better, and I definitely feel better using it. It feels like a higher quality cable. Some people are also waiting for that 90-degree adapter from Cable Mod, because remember, even in the case that I put it in, which is a Lee & Lee Odyssey, fairly large case, I can't really close the side panel without squishing that cable in there. Same might be true with the RTX 4080. They're going to be pretty big as well. This is still a very high-end GPU, so people have those concerns, and it's certainly legitimate. Not saying your cable is going to have an issue, but there is that small possibility, and if anything, it kind of makes people apprehensive about it. So that's one thing to keep in mind going to Nvidia and the 4080. Who knows how that cable situation will be? Hopefully, because it's less power, less TDP, it's going to be generally safer to use. And of course, AMD made sure people knew that their new GPUs are not using that 12-volt high power cable adapter, and they're using traditional PCIe 8-pin. The reference edition will use a double 8-pin, but of course you can expect the third-party AIB models from AMD to use at least, I would say, a triple 8-pin. Even the 6900 XT had triple 8-pins in, like, the Power Color, the Red Devil, those type of GPUs. Of course, the question if you should get the 4080 releasing, basically this month on the 16th, or wait for AMD. First of all, are you a gamer or content creator, or perhaps a hybrid? Now, if you're going to be anything that's a hybrid or a content creator, there's no doubt that the Nvidia side has a tremendous advantage still over AMD. Everything from encoding to using things like Blender, 3D application, those are going to be much better on the Nvidia side. That's just a reality. Now, AMD has had a lot of progress on that side as well with the content creation side on their Radeon GPUs, but something like a 4080 is still going to be at a much higher level comparatively to the 70 7900 XTX from some of the numbers that we've seen and from historically seeing how Nvidia software is supported, especially on more of like the workstation side. Believe it or not, a lot of people use these GPUs like the 4090, 4080 upcoming as workstation GPUs, because even though they're expensive and high-end as gaming GPUs, as workstation GPUs, they're actually fairly affordable compared to the Quadros and the special workstation GPUs that typically maybe will have more VRAM, but cost considerably more with diminishing returns in terms of their performance compared to something like a 4090, for example. So something to keep in mind, even though it's going to be fine for like general use, the AMD GPUs, they're not bad. Nvidia generally is just better. Now, if you're a gamer, no doubt that then you have other things to worry about if you're going to choose Nvidia versus AMD. For example, you may be more comfortable with the drivers. Even though AMD has improved, Nvidia probably still going to be superior with different support across games. And of course, we go back to that same issue of ray tracing and DLSS 3.0. Yes, AMD also does ray tracing, albeit at a lower level, and they do have FSR and the upcoming FSR 3.0, which should be fairly competitive against Nvidia's upscaling technologies, but DLSS is still superior for the most part across most games. It's easier to implement in a lot of cases, and the games that do support it, for example, Flight Simulator 2020, DLSS 3.0, I've tried it myself on the 4090, and it's super impressive. I mean, you basically double your frame rates at high resolutions on a game that's extremely demanding to play. So if your use case is one of the games that you know will use DLSS 3.0 and you're a gamer, I mean, that's going to be a pretty easy decision to go on the Nvidia side. Now, if you're going to be planning to do more traditional rasterization, especially let's say high refresh rate 1440p, you could definitely see where a 7900 XT or a 4080 can definitely keep those graphical settings high and your frame rates really high, especially at 1440p and 360 hertz, depending on the game, like even like an FPS game or something like that. So you can see an argument for these GPUs at the refresh rates that the monitors are providing, not to mention 4K high refresh rate, which of course the 4090, beginning with that, does really well with, and the 4080 should be pretty competent as well as the 7900 XT. But no doubt in traditional rasterization, for the price, most likely the 7900 XTX is going to be the best performance for the dollar if you really want to break it down. And with 24 gigabytes of VRAM, even though it's not the 6X variety, that's still more than plenty for any type of really high resolution playing. We're going to see what happens with stock of both the 4080 and the 7900 XTX and XT. Those are going to be basically the three biggest GPUs to come out this year, and I'm assuming they're going to sell out pretty quick. So if you guys stay subscribed, I'm going to try to update you on where to get them as I see it. Remember to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're thinking of getting. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.